You ever think you know someone, your husband, your best friend, and then one day, you find out they've been lying to you for years? Not little lies. The kind that destroy everything. I lost my job, my home, and everyone I trusted. And just when I thought I'd hit rock bottom, I found something that changed everything, a clue that turned my entire life into a ticking time bomb. What I discovered didn't just expose betrayal. It uncovered a secret powerful enough to ruin lives, including theirs. Hi, I'm Evelyn Hart. And this is how my world fell apart before I learned how to fight back. I used to believe that if you followed the rules, life would reward you. Work hard. Be kind. Stay loyal. Those were the principles I built my life on. And for a while, it seemed to work. I had a husband who made people laugh at dinner parties, a modest home that smelled of coffee and lemon polish, and a best friend who knew every secret I'd ever whispered after midnight. I thought I'd earned safety. I thought I'd built something solid. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday. The kind that feels too ordinary to be dangerous. My husband, Mark, was heading to a business trip at least, that's what he said. He kissed me on the cheek, told me not to wait up, and left his coffee half-finished on the counter. I remember thinking it was strange he didn't take his laptop. I didn't know that would be the last normal moment of my marriage. By afternoon, I was sitting in my office at Lumorous Medical Devices, reviewing a press release about some new surgical tool we were launching. I'd been with the company for 12 years, long enough to know the language of marketing promises. When the HR director called me in for a quick conversation, I thought it was about the upcoming conference in Denver. Instead, she handed me an envelope and said the company was restructuring. Just like that, I was unemployed. No warning, no thank you for your years of work, just a paper and a handshake that felt rehearsed. My boss, James, wouldn't even meet my eyes. I walked out with a cardboard box and the faint smell of toner still clinging to my hands. When I got home, Mark wasn't there. But Claire was. My best friend since college. The kind of woman who always had perfect hair and knew how to make every room her stage. She was standing in my kitchen, acting nervous. Said she'd come to check on me. Said she'd heard about my job. Said all the right words, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. There's something that happens when truth starts to wake up in you. It's slow, like water seeping through cracks in a dam. You don't see it at first, you just feel the pressure change. That night, I couldn't sleep. My phone kept lighting up with notifications I didn't understand. Bank alerts. Credit card withdrawals I hadn't made. Transfers between accounts I didn't recognize. I opened our joint savings app and saw the balance at zero. Every cent was gone. At 2:14 a.m., I called Mark. Straight to voicemail. Then I called Claire. It rang twice before she answered. Her voice was calm. Too calm. She said, "Eve, it's late. We'll talk tomorrow." And she hung up. The next morning, I drove to the address listed on one of the suspicious transactions. It was a small townhouse across town. Claire's car was parked in the driveway. So was Mark's. I didn't knock. I just opened the door. Inside, the house smelled like my perfume. My perfume. The one Mark used to buy me every Christmas. And there they were, sitting at the dining table with 2 mugs and a pile of documents. My documents. Divorce papers, already signed by him. My name typed neatly at the top. For a few seconds, I couldn't make a sound. It was as if my voice had dissolved under the weight of disbelief. Claire looked at me, and I'll never forget the expression on her face. It wasn't guilt. It was relief. Like the waiting was finally over. Mark stood up and said something about wanting a clean break. About how this was for the best. He said it like he was ending a lease, not a marriage. Then he handed me an envelope and said, "You'll understand soon." When I opened it later, it was a letter from his lawyer. Everything we owned, house, accounts, even the car, had been transferred under his name months ago. I'd signed documents he'd told me were tax forms. I'd helped him dismantle my own life without realizing it. For 2 weeks, I moved through the world like a ghost. No job, no home, no husband, no best friend. Just the echo of betrayal in every quiet moment. The people I thought would help me disappeared. Messages went unanswered. Neighbors avoided eye contact. I was invisible in the city I'd helped build a life in. I ended up at a motel off the highway, the kind of place that smelled like bleach and regret. Room 6. The carpet was rough under my feet, the air thick with someone else's sadness. Every night, I told myself I'd figure it out in the morning. Every morning, I told myself I'd survive another day. And then, on the 13th night, I found something that changed everything. It was an old suitcase shoved behind the dresser. Brown leather, scuffed edges, initials burned into the corner, HV. My Aunt Helen's. She'd died 2 years earlier, the so-called eccentric of the family. The woman everyone called paranoid. Inside was a stack of cash, nearly $60,000, and a note written in her careful handwriting. It said, "Evelyn, if you're reading this, they've already taken everything from you. But you still have one thing they can't control. The truth. Use it." There was an address written below, just a few miles from the company I'd been fired from. Beneath that, one final line. "Your mother didn't die by accident. Finish what I started." That was the moment the fear cracked open. Not gone, but replaced by something stronger. Curiosity. Anger. Purpose. I didn't know it yet, but that suitcase wasn't just a message from my aunt. It was an invitation. A door to a world where nothing was what it seemed. And walking through it would lead me somewhere I never imagined, straight to the center of the conspiracy that had destroyed my life. The morning after I found the suitcase, I sat staring at it like it might vanish if I breathed too hard. The cash was real. The handwriting was real. And the words, "Your mother didn't die by accident," were a hammer I couldn't unhear. For years, I'd carried her death like a closed chapter. A rain-soaked highway, a tired driver, an unlucky night. But now I had a reason to turn the page back. The address Helen left me led to an old building on the edge of town. The sign out front read Vanguard Consulting. I knew that name. Mark had mentioned it once, a partner company he worked with. Inside was silence and dust. Rows of filing cabinets labeled in Helen's meticulous handwriting, contracts, Meridian, Hart Estate. I opened the one with my mother's name and felt the air leave my lungs. She'd been working for Meridian Pharmaceuticals. The files showed trial data, payments, secret transfers, and an email chain where she questioned why results were being rewritten. 2 weeks later, she was dead. One document had my husband's name on it. Mark. His signature on a contract labeled Consulting Liaison. He hadn't just been cheating. He'd been part of the machine that killed my mother. When I found the hard drive taped under the desk, I didn't want to listen. But I had to. The recording was simple, 2 voices. Mark's, "Catherine's going to make this a problem." Another man's, "Then make sure she doesn't." That was the sound of my entire life breaking. For hours I sat there in the dark office, reading, copying, trying to keep my hands from shaking. When I finally left, I had a folder full of proof and a heart that couldn't go back to pretending. I called a name I found in one of Helen's files, Daniel Pierce, a journalist she once trusted. He met me at a quiet cafe that smelled like burnt coffee and rain. He scrolled through the files, his expression turning from curiosity to alarm. "Do you understand what you're holding?" he asked. "I understand it killed my mother," I said. He nodded slowly. "Then we do this carefully." For weeks, Daniel worked behind the scenes. No headlines. No noise. Just facts. He connected the dots my aunt had left behind. He showed the evidence to people who knew how to move quietly: investigators, lawyers, regulators. And while he did that, I rebuilt myself in the silence. I stopped checking my phone for apologies that would never come. I stopped trying to explain my pain to people who wanted gossip instead of truth. I learned how to sit alone in a room without feeling like a failure. I didn't need revenge to be loud. I needed it to be real. Months passed before I got the call. Daniel's voice was calm. "It's done," he said. That's how justice arrived for me, not in headlines or handcuffs, but in a single sentence that felt like the world exhaling. Meridian collapsed quietly. Executives resigned. Accounts were frozen. And the people responsible for my mother's death, including Mark, were stripped of the power they'd used to hide behind. There was no press conference. No applause. Just the sound of consequences falling where they belonged. I didn't go to the hearings. I didn't need to watch him answer for what he'd done. Some things are better left unseen. Justice doesn't always look cinematic. Sometimes it's just a closed door and a signed confession. I used what was left of Helen's money to start something small, a private fund that helps whistleblowers find lawyers when no one else will listen. No names, no recognition. Just quiet help. It felt right. It felt like her. Sometimes, I visit my mother's grave with a single white rose and a folded note. I tell her what happened. How truth took longer than she deserved, but it came. I tell her I kept my promise, even when it hurt. My life now is simple. A small apartment above a bakery. Mornings that smell like bread instead of burned coffee. No husband. No headlines. No noise. Just peace. Sometimes, I open the old suitcase again. The money's long gone, but the note is still there, ink faded, words alive. Use the truth. And I did. I think of Mark every so often. Not with anger. Just distance. Hate is heavy. Distance is light. He once said I'd never rise again. He was half right. The woman he broke didn't rise again, she disappeared. But someone else stood up in her place. Someone quieter. Stronger. Someone who knows that peace and silence aren't the same thing. And that's the kind of victory no one can steal.